Hello, this is Kara from Lady Kara Tarot with sort of a VR. It's not a VR per se to JD at Frost and Forest. 4 days ago, she did a deck collection video of her Fae and Fairy decks. And I mentioned to her something that those of you who follow me with my daily readings knows that I have taken a break this month from my alphabetical going through my decks, and I'm doing a focus on my Fae and Fairy decks this month. Some of the more obvious ones. And that's probably where I need to start, is that I have some that are really directly, obviously fairy, and some of them that are, I would call them fairy adjacent. Now, JD made a distinction between Fae and Fairy, with Fairy being more of the Victorian and Disney kind of light, bright, fun fairy, and Fae being the more traditional, pagan, darker side of the fairy realm. Can still be fun, but more tricksy, as Gollum would say, more tricksy or trickster, and ones that you have to be careful of. All of them probably should be careful of. So I think I'm going to start with my Fae decks, and so that I can move into the brighter things. So starting with my Fae deck, I'm going to begin with oracles. The first one is not too dark. The Dream Song Oracle. I consider this a Fae deck. Now, I also forgot, I am not including my fairy tale decks. And that's kind of because I had to draw a line somewhere, and that seemed like an easy distinction, although fairy tales, by their nature, are dealing with fairies also. But the Dream Song Oracle, I feel, is infused with a fairy energy, like that one. I think you can see how and why I would consider this Fae energy. It is, because it has a mystery to it, it's a little darker. But it has this kind of, there's definitely a pagan element in here, like this one. There are a couple images similar to that in this deck. So it has a, there's another one. Now I have other decks that feature young women with flowers in their hair, the Mysteries of the Secret Grove, Unlocking the Secret Garden, but they don't strike me as fairy. They just strike me as floral. Things like this image definitely are more in the Fae realm to me, this kind of thing. It's definitely a magical element to it. That's the Dream Song Oracle. Next is the Oracle of Rewilding. And to me, it's the combination of these human bodies with animal heads, the combination of vintage photographs with artwork, just give this a mysterious Fae fantasy quality to it. I really enjoy this deck, and the guidebook adds a whole nother dimension of psychological framework for it. the beautiful artwork of Alexander Eldridge. The Oracle of Rewilding. Next is one of the decks that inspired me to do this video, and certainly was a framework for my Faerie focus this month, is the Arthur Rackham Oracle, 2nd edition. This was a gift to me from my wonderful online friend Moonrain Magic. It was just an incredible resource of many, and her system knowledge is so incredible. Now these were fairy tale illustrations. This definitely has more of a fae energy than, because you see the goblins here, more of a fae energy than a fairy energy. Even though they were drawings for fairy tales, there is an ominous quality to the work. And as an oracle, I would say this is one of my darker oracles. Beautiful illustrations of Arthur Rackham. There is also an Arthur Rackham tarot. I think it repeats a lot of these images, and because I prefer the Edmond Dulac tarot, that's, oops. I haven't felt the need to get the Arthur Rackham tarot because I have these images here. Beautifully produced deck with gilding on the sides. I think you can see there's just a lot of fae energy with this deck. This Awakening card came up in my deck interview with this deck and frequently comes up prominently when I'm randomly showing it. Not necessarily when I'm working with it, but when I'm showing it. I don't usually do deck interviews with my Oracle cards, so it was interesting when I did the interview with this Oracle card. The final cards of this were very supportive. It was Awakening and a really wonderful, positive one. But there were a lot of cards that came up in that deck interview that were kind of saying, I'm a trickster, you better watch out for me. I can be tricky, but I like you. It was kind of the message that it was and very, very interesting and strong. It was that deck interview that made me realize that it is a Fae deck. Moving into my Fae tarot decks, I have the Carnival at the edge of the world, at the end of the world. I know it's supposed to be more of a carnival theme, but I just really get Fae energy from this deck. It might be sort of circus Fae, but it's still there seems to be a lot of pagan and a lot of fae that goes along with this. Oh, this deck feels lovely. Again, people with kind of animal heads here. We have these furry people. People that are elemental. This has quite a few additional cards in the majors, as well as a strong storyline that goes with it. So I have not actually used this deck yet. It got kind of pushed aside initially because I got it at the same time that I got Tarot of the Drowning World, which I was having a lot of problems with, and I became much more focused on that, and ultimately I resold it. So I definitely think of this as Fae energy. I think you can see that if you're thinking of it in those terms. I think it becomes apparent. The carnival at the end of the world. Continuing with tarot decks with Fae energy, I decided to include the Boadicea's Tarot of Earthly Delights, a deck that you know is a favorite of mine. I think it has many of the same qualities that I've mentioned in the other decks as to this interplay of magic and pagan and kind of dream imagery, and there we go, human type creatures with animal heads. And I just feel that this the focus on mushrooms, combination of with animals, the asparagus king. It's this could have been, I could have called this Fae adjacent, but I think there's a strong enough component here. This deck just has so much in it to start with that it's hard to classify, but I definitely would think of this as one of my Fae decks. These creatures that are just hard to identify. And then the use of fire in this deck, for some reason, too, also strikes me that way. And here, this, you know, her flower skirt and flower hair, flower petal hair, snail king. You know, this is a deck that I really love. I find it so easy to read with because there's just so much that it gives us. I like the weight, the card, the size of the cards. This image is just wonderful. So I think this also borders on the pagan elements too, as it, I guess, should with Boadicea, and or Boudica. And I would definitely, I'm moving into pagan territory now with this, the Fae energy. I do think that the Fae energy links up with pagan energy very well. Boadicea's Tarot of Earthly Delights. One of the decks I'm working with this month, And one of the decks that whenever I'm doing a Fae deck focus, this one is going to come up, and it's definitely Fae, not Fairy, is the Circle of Life Tarot, which again seems to be this blending of pagan, early history, and Fae. So, and I would say definitely Fae because there's a darkness to it. Here's prime example. Example number 1, the devil with the chained women. It's a round deck. It is a deck that I consider to be unnecessarily violent. And for a while I considered getting rid of it. But I really, really enjoy the artwork. But even the lighter cards have a darkness to them, which I definitely would equate with being Fae. But then you have creatures like this. Like a lot of the people creatures are either elven or more creature-like with scales instead of skin. I happen to like round decks. This one is perfect for reading and turning. Here are all those kind of bat-like creatures. So you can see it's very bright. Centaurs. I'm having to pause. I'm having some coughing jags here. This wonderful, multicolored fool, very elfin. Here again, you know, a small creature riding a tortoise. So I think you can see exactly why I would consider this both pagan and Fae. Fair amount of nudity. I love that magician. But this kind of humanoid, but are those tattoos? Are those scales on this? You know, we don't really know what these, if we had to quantify them here. You know, they have crustacean, they're crustaceans, they're shrimp people. And that sort of fantasy element I really enjoy. This way of designing the card so that you can look at it from a whole lot of angles. An elephant woman. The Circle of Life Tarot with these gorgeous backs. Oh, I will add here, the guidebook, depending on which version you get, the box can be different. The guidebook has some of the tiniest print. It's almost Tildwick tiny, but at least it's not italicized. But I was able to, this is a Los Scarabeo deck, I was able to contact them and get a PDF of just the guidebook so that I can look at it in larger print. They just had me give them the ISBN number because they wanted, you know, just a confirmation that I had purchased it and that I wasn't just getting it offline or something. So that was really nice that I got a more readable guidebook for it. Definitely moving into the pagan territory, the pagan otherworlds tarot. But I think you can see from this first card, there's a case for thinking of this as Fae, even though the title of the deck is pagan. I didn't realize I had ordered this. Well, sort of. So wait a minute. I was going through a lot of my decks and putting them in order. So we have definitely these nature elements, but then the people, Tammy Pie was saying that the way the heads and necks are set on the bodies, she couldn't handle, and I do see that, and that has bothered me too, but perhaps because I think of it more as a Fae deck, I don't see it in quite the same way. And then you get a card like that, and it sort of goes beyond just pagan to my mind. One of the most beautiful Wheel of Fortune cards, I think. And here again, we have this distended neck and head. I think we need some rudimentary anatomy drawing classes could have helped, but as I said, I don't necessarily think of these as humans, so I think that makes a difference in helping me through that. And then there are the moon phase cards, which I pulled most of those out. The pagan otherworlds. I think that's my last Fae deck. Next I have decks that, these are all tarot decks, that I would consider Faerie adjacent. So I'm saving the literal Faerie decks for last. One of them is a deck that I am working with this month, the Pipspeak Tarot. Perhaps because it can be a little hard to quantify. I think there's a little magical, childlike image of fairy energy to this deck, like that little ace of hearts there. This was another deck I came very close to getting rid of, and then I realized that some of my more hardcore Tarot de Marseille friends really like this deck, and that encouraged me to give it a second look, and I'm glad I didn't get rid of it. So most of the decks that I'm working with this month are much more straightforward fairy decks, but this was one that I decided I wanted to work with this, considering it fairy adjacent, you know, like a girl with cat's ears. If that's not fae or fairy, what is it? the adorable Pipspeak Tarot. Next is a deck I find quite difficult to read with, or did for a while anyway, Tarots of Tales and Legends. This is Fae adjacent because it is these tales of King Arthur, mostly focused on that. From the Romantic era illustrations. So just when I think it's not really Fae adjacent, then, or Fairy adjacent, then one like that pops up that does look quite Fairy adjacent. This, of course, is another one of these decks from Illustrator. Illustrator? Yeah, The Art of Henry J. Ford. Again, you know, we've got Puck there. Oh, definitely more pages. I find the system of this deck almost incomprehensible in terms of if you're trying to read it as a straightforward Rider-Waite-Smith. Again, this was another deck I almost got rid of, even despite the fact that I really like the illustrations. And then what I decided is that I will read this simply as a deck where I read the pictures and the card meanings are secondary, which would make it also a very good storytelling deck, which would be kind of using these illustrations in reverse. The illustrations were made to illustrate stories, and if you used this as a storytelling deck, you'd be reversing that process. So definitely, yeah, definitely part of this fairy world, or at least fairy adjacent world. A newer deck that went very quickly from Kickstarter to mass market is a deck that I got because I thought of it more as a kind of 60s, 70s pop art, but because it uses a lot of Victorian imagery, it definitely jumps into the fairy bandwagon as well. Beautiful, saturated, neon pop art colors, but then incorporating the Victorian imagery. So yeah, definitely fairy adjacent. Doesn't get much more fairy adjacent than that. This is coming up as a focus deck for me shortly because it hasn't worked into any of my other groupings, which I can sometimes use, and got 4 cards of nudity there in a row, so there is nudity in this deck. It's a beautiful linen finish. I just love this Ten of Wands. There are so many images that are incredibly evocative for me in this deck. And again, Victorian fairy imagery, quite prominent. The Moonjube Tarot. Next, we have the beautiful gilded Botticelli Tarot, which is predominantly religious imagery, I would say, historical and religious imagery, but then because of their interest in mythology, you end up getting cards that definitely are referencing fairy tales. Or the Fae. So it's not a large influence in this deck, but it's enough for it to rate as very adjacent. And another chance to just show this beautiful, beautiful deck. Which I do enjoy working with. Some of the pictures do not, they just don't work with, here we have more centaur images. Some of the images just do not work with the traditional meaning, and that's, again, it's a minority of them. Most of them, I think, are well chosen, and they added the wands and swords in, which I really do like. It makes it much easier to see what they're going for in terms of the meaning of the card. So I actually read with this pretty well, and then the few cards that I think are at odds, I read them as they are represented, not so much as the traditional meaning. The Botticelli, Golden Botticelli Tarot. Another more literally fairy adjacent deck is the beautiful Tarocchi Flora, or Tarot Flora in the English edition. Where we have these creatures for the majors, and also the court cards. Static pips. Oh, lots of breasts in this deck. I'll just say that straight up. Very static pips that really don't give you much. The flowers really don't give you anything extra because they are decorative only. One of the interesting things that's done is all of the queens are the same figure. It's just what is around her changes. The suit changes. The flowers change. Same, all of the court cards. They are the same in every rendition. It's just the symbols and the flowers around them change. And then we have all of them being kind of represented as being in a flower arrangement or on a flower vase. Again, making them more static too. They're, instead of being statuary, they're almost part of a floral arrangement. So here you see this one has dark hair and blue, and this one has blonde hair and orange, and the flowers change and the symbol changes, but that is the same image. It's an interesting way of doing those court cards and also bringing uniformity to those court cards. Here he is again, but he's white with red hair. This is a deck that, even while I might not usually use pip decks to read for people as frequently, this is one that I would, simply because it's so very pretty. Here you get a prime example there. Change of the toga, more gray, more black hair, blue horns, yellow horns, and the flowers change. And what they what they're standing on changes. But again, they're part of a flower arrangement, which is very interesting. Most of the majors are like that too. Here we have temperance. You know, temperance in a teacup. That's the name of my band. Temperance in a Teacup. The tarot flora. I'm trying to keep this moving along briskly because when I add fairy adjacent, I do have a lot of fairy themed decks. Next comes the intuitive night goddess. And I think that's why I always liked this deck. A couple things I liked about this deck. It often gets compared to the Goddess of Love tarot, often negatively. And I have to say, I like this one so much more. I've actually gotten rid of my Goddess of Love tarot. One of the things I like about this deck is that these are not any specific goddesses. These are about the goddess in every woman. And while they are primarily images drawn from the Victorian period, sense of theme here, the Victorian period, they are colored to evoke different races and acknowledge different races, and some people don't like that. That works for me. They also try to evoke different cultures, and some of these images are from that time period from different cultures too. So they cover it several ways. But again, it's not meant to be about a specific historical goddess that was worshipped. It's meant to be about the goddess, every woman as a goddess, and the every woman as a goddess, and I really like that. And so this is, I call this fairy adjacent because the images like that, for example, some of them really are evocative of, there's another one, of kind of flower fairy images. The Intuitive Night Goddess Tarot has an interesting guidebook, and I also find this a very good reader. In spite of some of the name changes of the majors. This next one is perhaps more obviously fairy adjacent because it has an inherent magical component, but with a focus on animals. I adore this deck, even though it's a little wacky. Love the backs of this deck, beautiful gilding. And it's digital art, animals and clothing, which is normally not my thing. Ugh. One of my good friends is an animals and clothing gal. Animals doing people things, and yet this breaks all of my rules of what I usually like. And then we have things like this, which are just magical forest kind of elements. So fairy adjacent, which I think you can see in the imagery. Things like that, little elf houses. Beautiful, beautiful tower. I think perhaps one of my favorite tower images. There are a lot of tower images I really like. And a beautiful high priestess. And a fantastic, fantastic book. Her books are always great. Next, on the Faerie adjacent, the Curious Travels Tarot deck. If you have it, I think you will understand why I would say that. Again, there is this an element of humanoid characters with animal heads. It has a magical, mystical element to it. And yet it remains very soft and even comforting. I mean, even with the tower. Yeah, that's a scary image, but it's not, there's something about it that it's not confronting. It remains more gentle, I think, in the way I feel it. And so it's kind of like, it's all there. The darkness and the light is all there, but in a way that's not going to be scary. I actually find some of the hand imagery to be some of the creepiest imagery in this deck. The spot gilding on this deck is just excellent. Beautiful, beautiful Seven of Pentacles. And the Empress. The Curious Travels Tarot. Next is a deck that I purchased simply because it is very adjacent. For me, the Line Strider Tarot. Also, I have nothing visually like it. And the little bit that I've gotten into the book so far, it's just excellent. A really, really interesting, unique vision. So again, we have a lot of animals. We have bright colors, but in this basically white line art with a lot of negative space. Those are the backs. It's about 50-50 people and animals, and it's more people-y than I thought it would be, but it's not enough to bother me. It just has such style. I think you can see why I would think of this as at least very adjacent. The Line Strider Tarot. I was able to get this at about 1/3 of the suggested price on Abe Books, I think it was. Next is one that I may be pushing it to call this fairy adjacent, but it's very adjacent to me. The Inaibi di Giovanni Vacchetta, one of my very favorite decks, recently named my soul deck. It's all the ribbons and the joyous abandon of this deck that like the Queen of Cups, they just feel very fairy adjacent to me. I mean, in some respects, you could say a lot of the traditional decks are fairy adjacent because they're including kind of a mythological element. But it is the joyousness of this one with the food and the ribbons and just the sweetness of these images and the sense of movement. It's all of that I think makes it very adjacent for me. Or it could just be because I like it and I just want to look at it all the time. Yeah, I'm not seeing one traditional fairy in this, so maybe not, but hey, I got to show it anyway. I naive di Giovanni Vacchetta. And my last fairy adjacent deck, although I could include the Journey Tarot, I think. Again, my storytelling tarot that I'm using for my affirmations of the day. I can see that being fairy adjacent, as well as the Fantasy Garden Tarot. I've shown them a good deal lately. This is, and I guess there is some argument for the Thoth deck to be considered fairy adjacent in some of the illustrations. No, I do have one more fairy adjacent after this, sorry. But anyway, the Zillick Tarot. It's the quality of the illustrations and the ladies with horns, and which make this more directly fairy feeling to me. I mean, there you go. It's incredible watercolor art. Again, it seems to be a mix of medieval and fairy. And some of those visual references do come directly from the Thoth original artwork. But here, having this kind of combination with flowers, again, does add more of that element to it, I think. The Zillick Tarot. And last but not at all least, my legitimate fairy decks. No, not Fae, although depends. But these are more fantasy fairy decks. And these are all ones that are in my rotation this month. The Tarot of a Moon Garden. This is the original version, and I love these borders so much that even though I like the look of the new version, I'm so glad I have the older version. This is a used deck that behaved like a Fae deck from the beginning. It gave me nothing but gobbledygook, and then through a series of various attempts at deck interviews, it told me that it wanted a 9-month rest, and I have enough other decks that I could do that, and I did, and it came back like a brand new deck with a completely different feel to the way it was reading, clarity. The only thing I did during that time was I did a fair amount of cleansings during that time. I don't even have to say anything about why I consider this a Fae deck, because I think it's so obvious. This is Fairy World with dragonfly swords and unicorns and fairy queens. And pentacle bubbles and castles in the air. And a lovely deck back as well. Tarot of a Moon Garden. Another illustrator deck that I consider to be a fairy deck. These were fairy tale illustrations by Edmond Dulac, and these are so well chosen. This deck is, although it's busy, you know, you can see the illustrations are a bit busy and complex. It's very easy to read with because the illustrations are so well chosen in this deck. I think of all of the illustrator decks, I know it's not the most popular, I think because of the borders. It's not the most popular, but I do think it's the one that has the best chosen imagery. And again, that's another reason I haven't gotten the Arthur Rackham deck, because I don't think the imagery is quite as well chosen in that deck, at least not to me in the way that I see them. And very obviously, very, very infused, the Edmond Dulac Tarot. I actually do have 2 other fairy decks on the way. One of them is the Enchanted Cats, the Enchanted Forest Cats, or something like that. And the other one is I think it might be, again, a word of enchantment, but it has a lot more, it's fairies and gnomes, and a very distinctive style. And I can't remember now who showed it. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. That's been on my radar for a while, and I definitely wanted it. Next is the Harmonious Tarot, another Lo Scarabeo. I found this is one that the first couple of times I looked at it, as much as I like this, I mean, it's Victorian. There is everything about this is Victorian, the good and the bad, and I'm just going to leave it there. So it has a colonial mindset, but it is much more than anything a fairy mindset. So it has that beautiful, gorgeous backs, beautiful, smooth, low scarabeo cardstock. The images are small because the deck is a little smaller than what we consider traditional tarot size. And they're little small fairy images. But it's legitimately Victorian flower fairy. That's a large component of it, are actual flower fairy illustrations from that time period. I'm getting very good, very strong readings with this deck too, and there's plenty to work with in each one of the illustrations. Flower fairy, there you go. Just simply flower fairy illustration, nothing else. There. The Harmonious Tarot is, again, one of my fairy decks that I'm working with this month. And for the big finish, Lunea Weatherstone's Victorian Fairy Tarot. This is a deck that when I knew I wanted it, even though this is, to me, a very busy art style. I like the fact that the 4 seasons are the 4 suits, and I think they work very well. The swords as winter, autumn as pentacles, spring as wands, and summer as cups. I just think it works in a very straightforward way. This is a people-y deck because this is obviously a large community of fairies. And yet, I used this for my daily readings because there is a quote, my scripture card and quote card, because there is a quote in the guidebook for each one of these. And it really opened this deck up for me to do a daily 1-card focus. And so that got me over that, the busyness of it and the peopliness of it, and more into each individual illustration. And since then, I've had some very strong readings with it. I enjoy it tremendously. And this is, I think, the only deck that I have that legitimately has any images of winter. So it fulfills a good deal for me. This came with that set where you have a larger than traditional tarot size deck, and then a mini deck as well. The Victorian Fairy Tarot, and that is the end of my focus on Fae, Fairy, and Fairy adjacent decks. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you saw something here that you just were tickled to look at. Thank you. This is Cara from Lady Cara Tarot. Fly away, fairies, fly away. We will chide downright if we longer stay.